For an action game series that's over 30 years old, you'd think there'd need to be radical changes to shake up the formula in order to keep it thriving. And yet, when you compare Mega Man 11 to the first Mega Man game, surprisingly little has changed, and the core essence of the classic Mega Man series continues to shine through. Let's see if the in-game character animation reflects this evolution in the 60-minute comprehensive visual compendium on how limitations shaped the animation of Mega Man. I'll be going through most of the games in this classic series with some extra non-franchise cameos for additional study. If you're not familiar, the Mega Man series is split across 6 or so spin-off series since the original game, which goes by the name of Classic, and this is the animation we'll be studying today. Grab some popcorn. Designing video game characters during the third generation of consoles was like trying to make a small character with Lego bricks. You had to crunch down certain details of a character so they could be represented coherently on screen. The official artwork of Mega Man is what informs his robotic design used in-game. We can make out most details, such as his helmet, his earpieces, his signature exclamation mark, his eyes and mouth, torso, arms, legs, gloves, and boots. That's enough visual information to make an interesting and distinct character. For the first Mega Man game, there are roughly 20 frames of animation for his entire moveset, including blinking, running, jumping, climbing, shooting, throwing, and some of those things combined. First thing to note is that while there are around 20 frames, it doesn't mean there were necessarily 20 individual images. The sprite work was likely split up in various ways to save on memory. Probably a lot more complicated than what I'm showing here, that's for sure. Let's not forget, games back then were designed using paper and maths. So what's the very first thing we see when we begin playing Mega Man and enter a stage? It's Mega Man teleporting down, depicted as this thin streak of energy beaming quickly down to the stage. His signature blue hues are present in a sort of motion blur type design. When he lands, his mass is crunched down into this squash and stretch type scenario, with a couple of multiple after images to show how quick this motion is, followed by one more frame of thin energy which rests on his standing stance. This is one of the more comprehensive linear animations in the game. The whole action gives this energetic, bouncy motion when landing. A good exciting start, I'd say. It's also reused when exiting the weapon menu, almost as if you've literally taken Mega Man out of the game and placed him back when you return. Kinda neat. Given the limited memory game cartridges had, idle animations were minimal or absent, but a little eye blink here keeps him from looking like an actual statue. Mega Man has a very small window for a nudge animation, where his front leg tucks in and gently drags his body forward, allowing the player to edge Mega Man forward by mere pixels for accurate jumps and timings. This plays into his very generous hitbox, where a player can impossibly stand on the edge of platforms for extra accuracy. Don't be fooled in this first outing though, the physics feel much more icy and less refined compared to later titles, so don't fall off. Speaking of hitboxes, when Mega Man takes damage, he is pushed back into this pose, his arms raised and legs skewed, unable to keep his balance, thus moving back slightly, with a distressed expression. His frames alternate between him, a crash star, and a blank frame, enforced by this lingering dust cloud that depicts some loss of energy. A blinking sprite is one of the most common ways to quickly and clearly display damage to a player character, still being used today. The blinking infers a short period where the player is immune to further harm, so the game isn't unfair. These are often called invincibility frames, or iframes. Shooting results in a snap to this forward-leaning action. There's no transition from glove to gun, pressing shoot simply results in this action, though there are design documents that detail how this physically works, were we to see it. This is where gameplay dictates the feel of animation. The snappy, tight controls and animation result in a satisfying gameplay experience, something Mega Man is renowned for. This goes for jumping too. Pressing jump takes Mega Man into his full air pose, attack face on, arms up high and outstretched, pulling his body upwards, his front leg bent up as though ready to catch a ledge. Shooting while doing this points his firing arm forwards, pulling back into the outstretched pose after a few frames of inaction. Bullets simply leave Mega Man's buster. There's no animation for any kind of energy that's expelled, like a muzzle flash or something. Mega Man will hold in this pose for a moment in case the player wishes to rapid fire, so it doesn't become unsightly too often. When Mega Man lands, he looks as though he returns to his standing pose, but you'll notice there's a little bounce effect. If we take a closer look, you'll see it's sneakily made up of two of his running poses that play very quickly to give the impression of a softer, bouncier landing. and then running is made up of 3 images that loop back and forth, creating a 4-frame loop. This is quite common for games of this age, as I've discussed in my video about keyframes. This is about as little information as you can get away with to create the illusion of movement. Let's have a quick chat about golden keyframes. Keyframes are the structure of animation. These hold the strongest information, which can then be smoothed out with in-betweens. A golden keyframe, you might not have come across this phrase that often, is a keyframe that depicts the most visual information of an action. It depicts so much information that you might only need one drawing to know what's going on, the type of energy involved, where the action is headed, things like this. Things which this game already uses. Fancy that. So, for running, only the strongest poses are present. If you were planning a running animation for something a bit more complex, these would certainly be the keys and golden keys. And then shooting and running is this, but with that gun arm outstretched, staying steady. Now, you might think when you press fire, the animation is being switched from this entire frame over to this entire frame. But because of some clever programming I mentioned before going on behind the scenes, Mega Man is split up in a particular way that allows fewer changes. His legs are constantly running, and in fact, only his upper portion is altered. It may even be simpler than this. When you climb a ladder, as with most other animations, you'll snap to this pose and it'll flip as you climb, giving this grabbing and pulling illusion. Again, only using those strongest poses to depict the action. You can shoot while on a ladder, naturally, and it results in his arm and head pointing in the last direction you are facing. A cute addition is this single frame as you pull yourself up. Something just to make sure you know your hitbox still won't allow you to get hit. Something Mega Man is famous for is stealing boss characters' weapons upon defeat, allowing more attack variation. This allows Mega Man to throw and hold certain objects, giving us these poses. Like other actions, this snaps into a fully thrown pose with the arm either outstretched in an arcing motion or straight up against his head. The arm looks a bit odd considering it has to stretch to reach the top of his head. Perhaps one argument where animation design should dictate character design. Upon death, the game freezes for a short moment in anticipation before Mega Man explodes into spheres of energy. Aside from a variant of the damage pose used for being stunned on the ground, that covers the entire first game. One new thing we get in Mega Man 2 is seeing how his helmet closes around his head and over his robotic hair. The exclamation mark zips down, with the sides materializing outward from the center, and then a sleek reflective shine. I love this animation. For the first time, we see Mega Man teleport out now as well. It's effectively a mirrored version of how he teleports in. Mega Man 3 introduces the slide. Keeping within that tight game feel, the action takes you straight into what could arguably be the strongest pose for such an action. To keep the sprite looking consistent, his head remains facing forward and unrotated, with the nearest side practically vertical, one knee raised like when he jumps, one hand steadying the move and the other keeping balance. There could have been other ways to portray this movement, but I think this does the trick quite competently. Now, we might as well jump into this right now. Have you noticed how Mega Man stands? Mega Man 3 introduces a few more frames of animations like topspin, which begin to question the 3D space Mega Man occupies and how he moves in it. Many games at the time used this 3/4 view, which could be argued is a more appealing and pleasant view of a character than being seen from straight on the side, which many other game characters also do. Prince of Persia, Flashback, and Another World are good examples where this side-on view takes on a more of a realistic appeal. Not necessarily always, but certainly in these cases, I think. Some are kind of weird, like Mario and Super Mario Bros. I mean, is he facing us with his head turned away, like he's having his mugshot taken at a police station? Mega Man is in this area, where his body is facing us, but his face is at a 3/4 view facing forwards. It works for the most part. When he runs, the body will partly twist as though it's now facing the way his head is, which is fine. But when the games start to depict Mega Man at a different angle, you can see that there's now an issue with how he is actually standing. Mega Man 5, for example, features a full turnaround animation, and if you comb through frame by frame, you can see that from the side he is actually facing forwards. So it's confusing in a sense, as the 3D design of Mega Man wasn't thought about too greatly at first, but ultimately it doesn't really matter because it's the feel of the movement that's important, I find. Carrying on, in Mega Man 4 you can look up when equipped with the wire adapter, which is cute. You can also charge your buster now, resulting in bigger and more powerful shots. Still nothing fancy when you release a charge shot, either from the buster or any recoil from Mega Man himself. Not yet anyway. Mega Man 6 introduces new adapters that give Mega Man new abilities, such as flying and heavier armor. When flying, he now tucks his rear leg backwards behind the other in more of a Superman style than when he simply jumps, which gives more of a feeling of propulsion, coupled with a simple rapid animation for the jet energy. Still that stony dead face, but the heavy power armor gives Mega Man more of a hunched look, resulting in a slightly slower run cycle speed. His shots are now thrown, and because they're stronger, the build-up is longer, which adds this wind-up frame, a tactical approach to shooting. I like that the glove glows with power and then releases it as a stream. Nice little touch. Feel and elegance are a couple of game animation fundamentals which these early games had no choice but to use due to limitations. But these limitations will end up shaping how Mega Man functions going forward. Before we move on to Mega Man 7, let's scour some other games that came out around this time for any more animation details. There were a bunch of spin-offs on the Game Boy around a similar time using largely the same sprites from the NES iterations, except running feels a little sluggish because your horizontal movement speed is a little slower to compensate for the smaller screen size. They got rid of the little bouncing frames too. Mega Man looks a little lower when sliding in Mega Man 2 for the Game Boy, probably due to having less space on the screen and tile size, etc. But this is fixed in later titles. For the first time in Mega Man 4, there's an actual kickback to when Mega Man fires a charge shot, which is an interesting detail to suddenly add, as this directly affects gameplay. It could mean releasing a shot while jumping a gap, and suddenly not being able to make that jump because it pushed you back. I'll be honest, I'm glad that didn't return. One thing that bothered me with the buster shots was that they pinged off quicker than the velocity they hit the object with. Mega Man 5 for the Game Boy has a couple of new animations for moves, such as this dashing, dabbing one, and this brief little picking up animation with his back turned to us. That's kind of interesting. The Wily Wars, which was Capcom's answer to Nintendo's Mario All-Stars, adds a couple of extra frames to Mega Man's running animation, which gives it this much softer and, in my opinion, less energetic appeal. It now feels like too much emphasis is given to the passing frames, whereas for an exciting retro action game, I think emphasis should be on the contact and down frames. They've now given the exit menu re-entry its very own animation, whether standing or in the air, which I think is a really neat detail. Everything else remains largely untouched, apart from a few extra frames here and there, but nothing that changes the overall experience or appeal. So the biggest change comes in Mega Man 7, classic Mega Man's first new 16-bit outing. Note how much more detail there is thanks to more available colours. Nice. Included in the larger scope for animation is Mega Man's very own Henshin Robot Master intro animation, accompanied with the music itself. I thought that was kind of nice, having a one-off bespoke animation. Henshin, without getting too deep, can be a type of summoning action which allows one to transform or equip themselves to be a stronger hero, which I think originates from a Japanese series called Kamen Rider and has been popular ever since. That's the basic gist, but feel free to elaborate on this in the comments if you know more. Every Robot Master in the series essentially has a Henshin animation to equip their energy. Anyway, teleporting has a much more fluid, liquidy look this time around, with Mega Man's essence just sort of moulding to his shape once he's landed. Mega Man now leans forward in a more ready-for-anything sort of pose, accompanied with a more stern face, with an occasional glance around when idle, giving us a tiny bit of 3D movement within that still three-quarter view. This leaning eases into the firing animation quite nicely, I find. To keep within that tight control scheme Mega Man is known for, pressing fire snaps straight into this firing pose again, as before. There's a very small animation for bullets leaving the buster with a tiny kickback if standing still. And there's now some particles which rise around you when you charge, with a slight kickback when you release a full charge, but only when you're standing. There's no kickback animation when running or jumping. It's kind of strange how he now holds his gun out to charge. I guess you could attribute some sort of headcanon as to why, but I think it's probably to do with giving more visual feedback that he's charging. Running is quite different now compared to the NES iteration. It's being boosted from 3 frames to 10, and he continues to lean forward in a hunched sort of way, and the legs tend to swing along to this increased bouncy bob. The up and down positions fall on the opposite of the NES animation, which results in a jogging sort of motion. Which is fine, I guess. This isn't my favourite of Mega Man's running animations, but it's not the worst. It definitely has a different feeling to that of the NES games, but whether it's better or worse, I can't decide, it's just different. We can tinker with it to see how different it could look. Jumping has a lead-in and lead-out animation, which are both the same but just inverted from each other, and both act as the launch and landing. No more subtle running frames for you, my friend. Actually, out of curiosity, what would that look like? The jump just has a nicer shape to the overall motion now, which I kind of like. Climbing has been given an extra couple of frames too. There's actually pulling motion now. Now, the increased scope of this game has allowed for a couple more moves for using weapons, such as using shield-type weapons. Mega Man brings his arms up and then straight out to the sides, as though summoning the projectiles. The result of this means the weapon isn't as instant as though it were being fired straight from the buster. There's a tiny delay while this animation happens. A tiny bit of risk-reward factored in, reflected through animation. Similarly, using Slash Core has Mega Man swipe his arm in front of him. That first frame where he's staring right at you is followed by a little smear and a couple of follow-up frames, but the main weapon animation reaches much further out. There's unique damage animations too, such as being frozen, electrocuted, or burned. Oh, sliding is as snappy as it was before, pretty much going straight into that pose, although Mega Man casually rests his hand on his knee as opposed to sticking it upright as before. Some dashing lines help sell the speed of the move. Little frame for getting back up too. Now, something interesting happens when you unlock a secret. Skip to this time frame if you don't want to know this about Mega Man 7. When you unlock Proto Man's shield, you can carry it with you to block enemy attacks, and you can also shoot at the risk of being open to attack again. But Mega Man has to carry the shield in a way that blocks enemy fire when he's not moving, which is otherwise resting on his back. The best visual place for it is the furthest arm forward, which happens to be Mega Man's rear arm. But that's where he normally fires from. What happens when you fire now? You shoot from your nearest arm now, which happens to be the furthest back in the pose. This means Mega Man has to lean and twist when shooting, and because that aspect of the power-up is uncompromised, this action still needs to be just as quick as normal, which means we see some snappy movement take place, at no detriment to gameplay. This is quite a neat little solution to what might have been a bit of a visual problem to figure out. Is it time to move on from Mega Man 7? It isn't time to move on from Mega Man 7. No, before we do, let's just take a quick look at the glorious Mega Man The Power Battles and its sequel, Power Fighters. Interestingly, these fighting games use mostly the same sprite work from 7 for Mega Man. It's interesting because the movement and animations translate nicely into fighting game moves. However, there are some small but significant changes that have been made to create a pretty fresh experience. Mega Man now kinda gets up from a kneeling style pose when teleporting in. Nothing crazy, but it's a nice addition that feeds into and expands that hero idea. We might see more of this. He's got an extra animation for wall jumping now, he has a victory pose, there are extra frames and animations for taking damage in various ways, such as rolling along and then using the arms to the side motion for steadying himself again. I really like that. Tiny bit of character animation and personality. Curiously, he now has a startup for running, taking a short moment to reach what we'd normally associate as a normal run speed. It's not massively noticeable, but if this were in one of the mainline games, we'd definitely notice. There have been some removals too, such as the kickback from firing a charge shot, his hand no longer raises when charging, and any sort of landing animation. But hey, things have to be that much tighter in a fighting game. Generally, this is like playing Mega Man 7, but as a fighting game, and with gorgeous animation. I wouldn't expect any less from a 90s Capcom arcade fighting game, to be fair. But wait, it gets weirder. There was also a demake of sorts for the Neo Geo Pocket, which used a combination of both the NES sprites and the SNES animations, resulting in this cool-looking hybrid sprite, using that limited palette and style with slightly more comprehensive movement. Cool, eh? It's 1996, graphics are shiny, new, and in 3 dimensions on current platforms. Has Mega Man taken the plunge and advanced onto... Nah, he's still 2D. But core blimey, what a game. The visuals alone earn it a spot as one of the best looking 2D platformers of the time. But how does Mega Man 8 adhere to and advance the principles set up previously? Common feedback from this game is that it feels sluggish to play, that Mega Man feels like he's running through molasses, which is thick black treacle if you're British. That's probably because it has so many frames of utterly gorgeous animation for absolutely everything. There's quite a lot to unpack from this game. For starters, we're now on a higher 2.5D viewing angle, so there's already a need for a much more solid depiction of 3D space around Mega Man, and this affects the complexity of some of the animations. The overall quality of this game is much more cartoony than we've seen before, but it's also kind of varied. Some characters lean into exaggeration more, others don't. But how does Mega Man fare? Teleporting in now has this whole song and dance. There's still the energy streak, and Mega Man lands, without his helmet I might add, as though he's a Terminator from the future. He rises up into this cool curved pose, and his helmet materializes around his hair, his robotic, lifelike hair. And after 100 years, you're ready to take control. Mega Man's gone back to just blinking in his idle now, no more looking around like in 7. The idle pose he takes kind of feels a little awkward, with that front fist sticking upwards. But as a silhouette, it kind of works, just feels a little weak. But then he actually stands with a straight back when alert, and he's like twice as tall, so he is really hunching when battle ready. He talks now too. Shooting has a few frames now. His buster kind of bulges as the energy is released, and there's a muzzle flash which shines back as well, which kind of looks cool when you're rapid firing. There's a tiny kickback from shooting too, but no bigger kickback for releasing a charge shot, which has gone back to standard charging now by the way, no more holding your gun up. Nothing too fancy, still adhering to that tight gameplay. Now, the running animation is kind of divisive in the community. The amount of frames we have for the run is gratuitous. It feels like far too many than we need, but I don't think it's necessarily the amount we're given, it's how they're handled. Firstly, I just want to point out that they run sort of twists throughout, alleviating slightly that previous requirement for a constant 3/4 view. Contact and down poses, which usually help with the bouncy weight of a run cycle because the down pose is when all the weight is being put on that leading foot, are far too similar to convey such weight. This isn't such a massive problem, but when you compare it with the fact that the run animation doesn't quite sync up with the horizontal sprite movement on screen, it begins to depict a feeling of running on ice, a similar problem which the later Mega Man X7 ran into. I definitely think the emphasis is in better places though, unlike in Mega Man 7. I kind of like how the head rocks from side to side too, though it does give the whole motion, once you've watched it for 2 hours straight, the sensation of a waddling duck, though that might just be my sleep-deprived state. You might think it overkill to take apart such a seemingly small aspect, but this is why I'm an animator, I look out for these little things. Hey, do you want to see a cool secret though? This is the prototype running animation for Mega Man 8. Can you see it? The speeds are the same, but there's a few key differences. His hands and feet look a little floppier than the final version. His head doesn't rock side to side and instead sort of tilts back to front instead, which results in a straighter back with the chest more forward. The legs raise up on the passing motion as opposed to swinging by in the final version. Honestly, this much more cartoony style of run seems to reflect the overall aesthetic more, but it doesn't really fit Mega Man, who's usually a little more serious and on a mission. For me, it's these few frames which really change the feeling. His hands kind of drag along behind the wrists as opposed to clenched and leading the motion. His fists and legs in the final version are much more confident, which is much more fitting for Mega Man. Okay, so back to the official version. The way the bulge from the shooting animation has been retained into the running animation is kind of neat. It's been built into the run itself, so it bulges every now and then, and not necessarily when you press fire. The effect is convincing enough though. The jump. Let's just compare these frames to the previous frames for a moment. There's around 7 frames to reach what would be that golden jumping pose, which then takes a further handful of frames to reach the new falling pose which has been integrated into the jump cycle since Mega Man 7. The landing is also a little excessive. Now, this, combined with the running animation, is likely the reason people are led to the feeling of sluggishness when playing this game. As Mega Man fans and players of platform games, we were used to the relatively recent 8 and 16-bit era games launching us straight into jumping poses when such a button is pressed. I mean, we don't even need to look as far back as that. We can compare Mega Man 8 directly to Mega Man X4, which released for the same system around a similar time. and Mega Man X, while still taking a few frames to reach that strong pose, gives that snappy feedback much more quickly, resulting in a tighter feeling. Mega Man 8, in my opinion, represents the very best of the classic series aesthetically. The general visual design of the game is nearly unmatched, but it's come at a price of lacking that good player feedback to many gamers. It strives for a much more cartoony, squishy and bouncy feel, which it certainly achieves, but to get that feeling, the game invests in many more frames which can come at a detriment to player feedback. Climbing, for example, can feel quite cumbersome when starting or finishing a ladder. I mean, it looks nice and you get a nice turnaround, for once, but I would like to be able to move again at some point before I die. I'm exaggerating, it's over pretty quickly. Sliding, however, has retained that instant feel, even though there's one tiny frame leading into it, which you don't really feel when playing. There's a kinda shaking motion during the slide, which I can take or leave. I don't feel it really does anything to enhance or degrade the action. There's some frames that lead out of it too, but these are for decoration. If you begin moving during those frames, they're cut short. So I personally really enjoy the animation and its feedback in Mega Man 8. It doesn't quite match that tight feeling from earlier games because the animation no longer reflects this as much, and this is certainly what puts some people off, but I think it's enjoyable. Aside from our standard set of animations, we're treated to yet more additional moves. Mega Man now has a swimming animation. I mean, it's fine, it doesn't blow me away, it's just there. I'm not sure it's necessary really, it never comes back, so. Something I quite enjoy is swinging from grapple points with Thunderclaw. Mega Man steadies his Buster Arm as though keeping a tighter aim, and he maintains a sense of gravity as he swings, resulting in this nice arcing movement. I'd like to see more of Mega Man steadying his Buster like this. In a similar fashion to Slash Claw, Flame Sword has Mega Man swiping forward in two different ways, depending if he's standing or jumping, and a third if you're on a ladder. The one for jumping still looks as though he's standing, which I've always thought odd. Could have just fixed. The action itself is quite fast, but lingers on a little once finished, giving this nice fire trail in an arc. There's a nice screen clearing weapon accompanied by, in comparison, a fairly basic animation. But it's a nice striking pose, spread out in a summoning star shape. Could have been a bit more opportunity for some flair here, I think. It's cool how many little bespoke pieces of animation there are, such as Mega Man getting hit and thrown to the ground in Tenga Man's battle, and how can we forget that kicking animation with Mega Ball? Instant smear, instant result. You do have to wait for the leg to return before you regain control, however. Also, I never actually knew you could aim Mega Ball. I much prefer this game's damage pose than any previous ones. It genuinely looks like he's feeling pain by stiffening his entire pose while facing upwards. This feels a bit more like how a robot, powered by electricity, would react, as though being electrocuted. The others are fine, but this is best. Oh, and one more thing. Mega Man 8 saw a second life as a semi-sequel spin-off as Mega Man and Bass for the Super Nintendo. It's best to think of this as Mega Man 8.5, as it reuses all the sprites from Mega Man 8, but retrofitted for the SNES instead of the PS1, which is actually amazing when you think about it. They even added a few extra frames too, such as a low health animation, and the ability to shoot upward for a special weapon. I mean, it looks a little odd, but it's fine. It has to have that same tight reaction as shooting normally, so they couldn't go too crazy with it, like having his head look up each time. Well, I mean, couldn't they? They probably could have. How are we doing for time? Ah, crap, this is going to be a long one. Okay, so the next two big games to depict Mega Man were a fighting game Cameo in '98 and a remake of the first Mega Man game for the PSP in 2006. Both go for quite different things. Marvel vs. Capcom goes for serious, Mega Man Powered Up goes for light-hearted. Both are perfectly viable options in my opinion. Marvel vs. Capcom is carrying on the design from the then recent Mega Man 8, with longer limbs and feet and a slightly more muscular appearance. This creates a different feel of movement compared to the very squishy, chibi-styled, short-limbed, almost inverted Mega Man Powered Up some 8 years later. Granted, Marvel vs. Capcom is a pixel art fighting game and Powered Up is a 3D modelled action platformer, though there's different emphasis on different areas. This Mega Man hasn't got a terribly comprehensive run cycle because you're likely to spend most of your time attacking than running for any amount of time. Whereas this Mega Man focuses much more heavily on a bouncy, characterful run cycle, because that's what you're going to spend most of your time looking at. Marvel vs. Capcom focuses more on unique attack actions, such as punching and kicking, giving way to nice striking poses and classic fighting game language, such as smears and overshoots. When you look at the moves Mega Man is traditionally known for, such as shooting for example, they've been extended in ways that make it more related to how fighting games work. With some fighting game moves, you have to build in ways to delay action so there's more of a risk-reward element for more powerful moves, such as winding up for a stronger punch for example. We'll come back to how Mega Man shoots in another fighting game, but in Marvel vs. Capcom, the only shooting action you have is a large projectile, which you have a few frames leading into, but this can still be charged for a larger projectile. For once, Mega Man leans back when shooting, as though the power of the shot needs steadying. I said that, didn't I? I said that I'd like to see more steadying of the Buster. Not like this. Changing weapons is literally done by calling in Eddie to give you the item, which you have to collect and then subsequently use. In most modes anyway, I think. Eddie is summoned with this pose from Mega Man, which feels very Mega Man X, almost. You could liken it to his henshin pose from Mega Man 7, I suppose. Some things like sliding and jumping have the same sort of immediacy that's present in the classic platform games, so that's nice. Having him pull his legs up at the peak of the jump makes a nice change too, although this feels less in line to what we'd expect in a platform game. In a similar fashion to Mega Man 8, there's much more attention to the 3D space Mega Man occupies, much more attention to how he can contort and twist. There's more understanding of his anatomy, at least in a 2D sense. Honestly, I'm not even going to analyse this mental-looking hyper move because I don't think this is in the spirit of classic Mega Man, and again, feels more like Mega Man X. And also, it's just a static pose, there's nothing to really analyse. I prefer these hyper moves if they have to have some ridiculous over-the-top action for every character. In stark contrast, Powered Up generally focuses on more bouncy characterful animations. The first thing to note is, for the first time, Mega Man is being depicted with an actual 3D model. How do all the previous animations translate into this new format and viewing angle? So far, each animation has been crafted for a specific need, with little consideration to what happens between these animations, which in game animation is referred to as fluidity. 3D model rigs have much more potential for smoothing out the transition between animations, which is sometimes called additive posing. It's a little too early in the timeline for Mega Man to experience this leap in technology, but a 3D model does allow for some other things, such as an easy little looping idle animation when standing still, something which does not return in mainline games. Low health animation returns though, like he's exhausted from a long run. So in light of this, Mega Man still stands at this front-facing 3/4 view, but when he begins running, it switches to a much more side-on view, something that could have looked okay in the older iterations, but running at a 3/4 view simply wouldn't work as well in this 3D style. He'd feel as though he was running towards us, or at least that's how we'd assume this 3D model would work. We'll cover this idea more later though. The center viewing angle seems more focused on the right-hand side of the screen, meaning if you were to face left, you'd see more of behind Mega Man, something of a first. The run is much more bouncy and squishy, although a little slower too. It's fairly non-distracting, with the limbs all swinging at an even, consistent pace, which is mostly fine. It totally fits the much more childlike aesthetic for this version. It even feels like it draws inspiration from Mega Man 8 with the floppy-styled boots. But the fact the limbs move at such an average pace and that there's little tonal difference between front and rear limbs occasionally makes it hard to differentiate which limb is which, giving the run an odd, confusing quality, at least in its silhouette. Unlike 8, 7 and Marvel vs. Capcom though, the head stays mostly still, with no side rocking, giving off either a more determined look or a feeling of indifference, I'm not quite sure. There isn't really a determined energy coming from the cycle, not really striking any interesting or powerful poses that you'd expect from the series so far. Again, like Mega Man 7, the bounce feels a little like it's in the wrong place, with the lowest position taking place during the passing phase instead of the contact or down phase, resulting in a leisurely appearance than a meaningful one. I mean, it's fine, I just don't personally think it works for Mega Man, but it makes more sense here with this style than anywhere else. Everything that's worked before works again, so when you shoot while running, because this is a 3D model, the arm simply switches to the shooting pose while the rest of the animation remains the same. Jumping launches you straight into a pose rather than have a lead-in as with Mega Man 8. This time though, we've got a different take on that pose. There's the up pose, which consists of Mega Man raising his hands, in front and behind, kinda like normal, but as we begin settling into the fall pose, Mega Man raises both his feet to rest in a forwards position, with both arms pointing backwards, as though he's just completed a long jump. It feels much more playful, childlike, as though he's more focused on making a good landing than performing the jump itself. Both of these pose setups play out when walking straight off an edge too. I kinda like this detail. It feels like Mega Man is a tad underprepared for all this action, which fits well considering this is a retelling of his first adventure as a superhero. This might perhaps explain why Mega Man doesn't stop on a dime that we've come to expect. Though this might also be reflecting the unrefined physics from the original Mega Man's feel, where it might occasionally feel like you're on ice. Either way, this added delay doesn't actually affect the feel of the game as much as you'd fear. Sliding is an unlockable move in this game, but notice the sluggish motion it has, not nearly as quick as previous iterations of this move, likely to make it more risk involved. But man, I love that finishing pose. Again, it feels kind of clumsy and playful. Shooting while jumping simplifies the poses, giving it a much more static feel. Oh yeah, shooting. Tapping shoot sends you into this repeating cycle, which gives off more of an impression of keeping a fire hose steady. But the transition from Buster to Arm, while brief, is a nice touch. Has his mouth open while shooting now too. Gives it a bit more life, I suppose. Now, this model is weird. Shooting in either direction has Mega Man shoot with the rear arm, as you'd expect. But if you run and shoot, or jump and shoot, then Mega Man always uses his left arm. It's just a bit odd, as it's a different feeling when your view is obscured by an action usually in the background. His body usually covers up this weird stretch and steady thing going on, and it's unsightly, snapping from pose to pose. But look at this. I love this. Gently touching the wall if he's near one. One thing before we move on is the big head design has become detrimental in performing the lifting animation, which wasn't such a big problem in the 8-bit era, as it was always going to be in one pose, but now this is one animation from all angles, and his little arms don't reach above his head. Luckily, because this is a much more cartoony take on the whole aesthetic, his arms simply stretch more than they should so the action can work. I wonder how they'd have handled this if it was a more serious model. Oh, also, a couple of other points. There's some interaction between characters now, so we get to see Mega Man talking and performing some gesticulation, and when you fight your copy, his power summoning move is similar to that of the Marvel vs. Capcom pose. Fancy that. Oh, and teleporting in is real squishy, kinda like an exaggerated version of Mega Man 8's. Overall, a more childlike cartoony depiction of classic Mega Man moves, giving off a slightly calmer feel when compared to the original, and I do love the end stage winning move. Okay, moving on to our last two examples. Mega Man 11 and Super Smash Bros. Arguably two of the greatest versions of a 3D classic Mega Man, having the good fortune and foresight of nearly 30 years to refine all those design and animation ideas into a cohesive, sleek and exciting moving action character. How do they both interpret everything we've seen so far? Let's not forget that both are celebrating the character's history in some way. How have they represented and enhanced tight 2D movement in clear and concise ways without being detrimental to player feedback? Smash Bros. Brilliantly translates that classic limited 2D movement into cohesive 3D action, while Mega Man 11 uses those limitations as influence to explore and evolve. It's no secret that Smash character animation is off the charts when it comes to fitting in everything it needs at no detriment to gameplay while looking beautiful and full of flair. In Mega Man's case, they've had to make some cosmetic changes to his design in order to get certain 2D actions to work in a 3D model, such as having his hands separate from the main bulk of the glove section. This allows for quick, concise switching actions when shooting a projectile is concerned, and some fun mechanical animations during downtime. In terms of matching these animations to their sources, it's really rather accurate. Using these limitations as starting points works really well for translating them into fast-paced fighting game language, namely being able to move and attack and evade within microseconds, thanks to everything being at 60 frames per second. So, in terms of just how accurately Smash manages to recreate the NES poses entirely depends upon the new 3D model. The proportions have been carried across without it looking ridiculous like how the powered-up model might have looked. So, standing is fine. More idle fidgets have been added, shooting recreates that snappy lean forward pose, no kickback as you'd perhaps expect, keeping everything as though lifted straight from the NES. Charging, however, causes Mega Man to shake, as though holding in energy, just to give some more visual feedback to enhance that silhouette. It's the running I want to take a keen eye to. The powered-up model wasn't as keen to take visual risks to match the original posing and movement as the Smash model is, resulting in a side-on view when running. This Smash model, however, contorts and cheats to replicate that same look. You'll notice the limbs clip through each other to make the correct poses from the NES frames. The head deliberately faces more towards us than straight ahead. In fact, we could probably isolate and match the frames in Smash to those of the NES. It's all timed really well. The feeling of this run cycle captures and interprets those limited frames almost exactly. There's not too much emphasis on the passing frames, and it's bouncy in the right way, unlike the floaty powered up and the linear Mega Man 8 or the goofy Mega Man 7. As I mentioned, if we look closely, we'll see that the body rig has to contort in certain ways to capture this look, but thankfully we're zoomed out most of the time, so this doesn't really matter too much because it's the overall motion that's been captured. Similarly, these poses only make sense from the angle we see it from, and would likely not make as much sense from any other angle. Most of the other animations adhere to those striking poses and timings set by the NES games, such as jumping and sliding. The fluidity between animations is really high, thanks to 60 frames per second. You'll rarely perform an action that looks out of place when coming from a different pose, even if it's a mere handful of frames to bridge the two actions. And it's because of this that actions which would have been instant in the NES games can get away with having an extra couple of frames to set up that action and smooth out those transitions, know what I mean? And of course, you've got a bunch of new bespoke animations tailored to a specific move, such as fire and electric moves that use anticipation and overshoot to crank up a real hard hit. You've also got a sprint animation, which is your typical Naruto run, which I don't really think fits Mega Man, though I'm not sure what would take its place. And naturally, slower movements have taken inspiration from the NES games too, such as that edging forward movement being used when moving slowly. It's lovely how limitations which shaped Mega Man's behaviour can also be expanded to new moves that fit visually into this repertoire of actions. None of it looks out of place. So in comparison, how does Mega Man 11 capture and evolve that original movement? First off, I just want to say that Mega Man teleporting and landing in a kneeling pose has suddenly become standard. Additionally, he does a bouncy leap up and sort of shakes off the excess energy. Like Smash, he's back to standing up straight like in the originals, still facing towards us at a 3/4 angle, and has some more idle fidgets, such as looking around like in Mega Man 7. Now, there's some cool stuff and some weird stuff that happens in Mega Man 11. Shooting is still instant, but it's the bullets and muzzle flash that appear first, and unusually, Mega Man takes a moment to raise his buster to that shooting position. Powered Up had a cartoony muzzle flash which tended to stick around after appearing, but it wasn't as bad as this. And you can actually see it in real time, too. It's not like it's particularly quick. This isn't the case when jumping and shooting, however. I know 60 frames per second affords you more minuscule moments to play around with, but this feels a bit gratuitous. But there is now a slight recoil upon shooting, which only increases more and more the longer and harder you charge your buster. For the first time ever, there's one frame of anticipation for jumping, which leads straight into a handful of rising 3/4 view frames, in a similar fashion to Mega Man 8. But he hits that strongest pose much quicker. You can kind of feel it too. It takes up no extra time in jumping, and it just reinforces that motion. Clever. If this anticipation was added so much that it was felt, resulting in a delay, that'd massively affect the overall game feel, something Mega Man is not known for, and would likely have caused a little bit of controversy. Trust, we're that picky. Landing while stationary is really nice too. A good amount of bouncy follow through to look at if you're not moving. Taking damage reinvents that older pose, combined with some additional shaking on the model to further communicate that visually. You feel like he's in pain too, it's a nice pose. It feels a little more in line with the powered up model, knocking back to a set point and wobbling rather than gradually flowing backwards before you regain control. Interestingly, that flickering has been removed, instead reinforced by electrical discharge and a tiny glow. Personally, I don't think this is as clear as flickering. Sliding gets off to a quick start into that more relaxed pose from 7, but you have to wait to get back up when finished, something that wasn't present in previous iterations. This has led to speedrunners gaining and using Piledriver from Impact Man first, so that move can be used to cover more ground quicker. Oh yeah, the special weapon animation. So we've come a long way in 30 years. Thanks to higher frame rates and model rigs and all of that magic that modern animation methods afford us, we can make fancy and striking poses that don't jar too much between actions and that don't slow down the flow of gameplay, retaining the original tight feeling from those 8-bit games. Most weapons have a unique shooting animation, whether that's with Chain Blast having a real quick swiping motion like Slash Claw, Acid Burst having that summoning action like Jump Shield, a spinning action like Top Spin, or Fuse, Shock, whatever that one's called, but they all react instantly to a button press. This is kind of opposite to how Smash handles special weapon moves due to the difference in game design. Stronger fighting moves need longer to set up, so there's the risk-reward factor. so you get longer actions for things that would normally be instant in a classic game, like summoning Leaf Shield or firing Air Shooter. So it's the running animation that seems to get all the criticism, and I know I was certainly put off initially. The key poses don't really capture the energy from either the original or the Smash interpretation. Like how the Powered Up and Mega Man 8 run cycles place the emphasis on different areas for a different feel, so does Mega Man 11. It feels as though there's more emphasis on the passing frames and not enough on the actual contact frames, which gives it a jogging kind of feel, which we've seen before. The issue feels exacerbated by weaker poses when compared to the Smash iteration. Also, when you begin running from standing, you turn more into the run, which makes sense because that's what you do, which isn't different from Powered Up. However, when you jump, you retain that three-quarter view, so if you happen to be running, jumping and stopping a lot, you're going to find your pose flicks quite a bit. This isn't a big issue, but I think it's a slight oversight, something which could have been smoothed out with the jump also facing more ahead than towards us. One nice thing is that there's still a tiny landing animation within the run if you land from a jump while running, which I think is a nice detail. Ultimately though, it feels as though there's not enough energy in the run, which gives it a flat sort of appeal. It's clear from development material that the original animations were indeed considered when animating Mega Man 11, but there must have been a desire to step away and push forward with new ideas. Some ideas work, whereas some ideas feel a little underbaked. In the end, the feeling while playing matches the tight responsiveness of those original games, while keeping an exciting amount of action in the animation and sneaking in additional movement into that generous 60-frame gap. So what have we learned from all this? Well, I'll tell you one thing, we haven't actually finished yet. Go and get a cup of tea and a biscuit and sit back down. We're in this for the long haul. The point of this video was to study the mainline games to see how the original 8-bit restrictions helped shape and evolve Mega Man's animation, but that doesn't mean we can't also look elsewhere to see how and if these limitations have been embraced or forgotten, according to my own arbitrary rules I just made up in my head, which I'm not going to tell you. Did you think I'd forgotten about obscure titles like Mega Man and Base 2 for the Wonder Swan, or Mega Man Soccer? Or forgotten about superb Fangames, or Cameos, or cancelled games? Let's dive deeper. Mega Man Soccer came out before Mega Man 7, and as such, the game actually appears to take inspiration from the Wily Wars for its sprite work, and impressively still keeps that 3-frame rule of run cycle limitation, but in 4 different angles. And when I say angles, I mean straight 90-degree turns, no 3/4 view stuff, so for once we actually get to see what a retro side-on Mega Man run looks like. It's definitely a different feeling, and I'd be fascinated in seeing how this would look in a platform game. You get some nice other poses too, like that first iteration of the kneeling, and this super fun action when you win a score goal, or whatever it is that happens in sports. Mega Man and Base 2 is an obscure title for an obscure handheld system called the Wonder Swan, made by Bandai. Everything is still in place, it's all still tight, it's just the poses. Still 3-frame run cycle, although it looks and feels more like a walk cycle now. Shooting results in a leaning back pose, jumping looks a bit more like a wrestling move, sliding has you crunch down to half your height with Mega Man's head disappearing into his chest. The idle stance looks like Mega Man's holding an invisible guitar. Like, all the timing and everything is correct, it just lacks so much appeal. And we all know how subjective and difficult appeal is to get right and explain. This is honestly the only game where it all feels wrong, and it's no surprise considering it wasn't made directly by Capcom. I'm just surprised they didn't lift or copy the sprite work from 8 more directly as reference, even with limitations. The limitations still dictate how the animation functions, but not how it looks. Mega Man Universe was going to be a level creator style game based around the design of Mega Man 2 with a new art style, and with it a new version of Mega Man. The overall design was similar to Powered Up in that there were 3D models moving on a 2D plane. The movement was generally kind of nice, like the up and down poses on the run felt quite nice to look at, and everything was still tight as you'd expect, but there were some odd design choices. Namely, Mega Man's long torso and short leg, giving the appearance that he's dragging his knees on the floor while running, which is incredibly odd. Notice how the body turns slightly toward the run, but Mega Man's head still has to face us a little more, but with just the eye looking forward to kind of fake that 3/4 view. Remember, this was before Smash Brothers. Still haven't figured out how to run forwards with everything facing us yet. Jumping kind of had him swing his legs forward underneath him like he was about to body slam the ground. Another peculiar choice. I like the shooting pose, some nice dynamic lines going on there. Again, everything felt snappy, or at least looked snappy because no one ever got to play it. But yeah, if I'm completely honest, I think this game's cancellation was a bit of a blessing in disguise. Soz. Now, Mega Man games have always been big in the fangame community. There's a handful that break away from the original 8-bit artwork and evolve into their own style, and with it their own animation. Mega Man Slide is where I want to start, which uses a gorgeous 16-bit art style and has Pump Man stage from Mega Man 10 completely remade using these new assets. The poses are nice, actions are responsive and tight, there's some nice 3D movement in the run. The only thing that kind of sticks out to me is the body length in the overall design. It gives the legs a shorter appearance, and it doesn't quite work for me, but I do like the pose when running. Mega Man twists his body more, and running and shooting, Mega Man brings his upper torso to a more steady pose, bringing his other arm up, and it gives the impression he's steadying himself more during an action which requires more precision, so that's nice. Mega Man Shattered Diamond and Mega Man Perfect Blue both take on a more stylized approach to that classic 8-bit artwork, both reworking the stance and running animations, injecting a bit more energy into those poses, with slightly more dynamic line angles. Shattered Diamond adds an extra frame on the passing pose, and Perfect Blue adds an extra frame on the contact pose, both timed rather well to give a similar feeling. Diamond gives Mega Man the kneeling entry, whereas Blue comes in a little more traditionally. Both have an up jump pose and a down fall pose, and interestingly, Perfect Blue gives Mega Man the ability to shoot while sliding, something of a first. All three of these games look absolutely brilliant, and massive kudos to the devs on them. Mega Man GB is a hand-drawn remake of the first two Game Boy games being made by... Oh, that's me. Ha! I'm attempting to reapply what we've learnt here into a concise but more glamorous and time-consuming visual approach, squeezing all of that exciting Saturday morning energy from those classic games into a crisp and cartoony aesthetic. Still way early days on this one, refining everything through iterative processes and using a friend to do the programming. Maybe one day there'll be a demo, but who knows. So one more question before we draw a line under this and move on to what we've actually learnt, and then you can get back to your lives. Why hasn't there been a fully 3D classic Mega Man game? Whether that's a third-person shooter like Splatoon or an isometric type affair like Hades. I think my main response to this is that you'd need to tweak and finesse all of those interesting dynamic poses which we recognise from a side-on view into a fully 3D space, and have them look just as interesting, dynamic and readable from any angle. This doesn't mean it can't be done, obviously. The series in general has taken the plunge into 3D on occasion, with one series being 3D from the start. But I think it's a combination of the 3D design and the overall gameplay that wouldn't quite work as well as it would in 2D. But having said that, we do have a small window into how classic Mega Man would look in 3D thanks to a special Mega Man event in the game Dragalia Lost. Mega Man was a special playable character and had his own attacks and such. They've created this really cool effect by limiting the frame rate to match the look and feel of the NES games while running. I mean, that's really neat. Teleporting looks as though it's that exact animation from those 8-bit games. The actions are limited in some ways, like throwing looks okay, but nothing amazing. They've kept some things, like bigger attacks taking a moment to initiate. Jumping isn't an optional move in this game, but there are moves which involve jumping, so we get a slight glimpse into this action from multiple angles. Generally, it all looks really nice, and actions come across fairly clearly. I think the one thing I'd do is just exaggerate those poses further to increase that readability. Although that can't be done in this game, as the animations applied to Mega Man generally come from a set of animations that are applied globally to all characters, so we do have to settle for some homogeneous appearances when considering resource. One thing we can see quite clearly from this fantastic resource website is how Mega Man would technically look when running at a 3/4 angle that we've come to expect from the series. When we view it this way, we can see just how much has gone into forcing this perspective on this animation, particularly with the Smash model. Overall, I think a 3D Mega Man could work, at least visually. Design-wise, it'd take some perfecting in order for it to feel as good as the 2D adventures. Also, it's bloody fantastic seeing Mega Man doing some fancy dance moves. I'm sorry, I'm just not going to talk about Mega Man DOS. I can't. Okay, so now that we've spent, an hour studying the evolution of Mega Man's animation and how those first limitations shaped things to come, what have we learned? Snappy, tight controls. Have everything respond immediately. Worry about fancy animations after the action is finished, perhaps transitioning into a resting pose or landing from a jump. Don't waste time like Mega Man 11 setting up the shooting pose or Mega Man 8 setting up the jump. Though don't be afraid to add in small flares, like a tiny startup animation when running, for example, so long as the motion itself is tight and responsive. Have poses similar to each other so they can flow in and out of each other cohesively, tightening the experience with a visual language that doesn't become a chore to look at. Perhaps avoid over-the-top reset animations so it's not jarring when you snap back to the action. If you have a 60 FPS model, squeeze in small transitions between things like sliding and standing, getting off ladders and such, but don't linger on them for too long. Gameplay feel is paramount. If in 2D, best to keep transitions to small visuals only, adding in additional flair with things like dashed lines and smears for quick actions. Posing. 3/4 view feels like it works best, and preferably while doing other things too, like jumping and shooting. It feels more intimate than side-on, and we get to form a connection, even if it's a basic repetitive one. The only issue with this approach when tackling in 3D is the contortion you need in order to keep everything facing towards camera during gameplay, but there's evidence to suggest this can be done confidently, and even if it can't, side-on for other actions like Empowered Up doesn't jar too much. Keep everything sharp and dynamic, use exaggerated poses to keep them from looking weak or stiff. Mega Man is prime Saturday morning material. Don't be afraid to lean into that energy. Running. This needs to pop. For an action that's going to be seen a lot, pushing that exciting energy to the edge is a must. Have dynamic lines of action pushing in the direction you're running. Pay a little more attention to contact poses than passing poses. Put the down pose on the contact rather than the passing. Launching yourself on that passing pose gives a more energetic feeling than bouncing up from it into a leisurely jog. Cheese it up. I've actually learnt that, while Mega Man 8 suffered somewhat because of its over-ambitious animation, Mega Man could do with some more bouncy, cartoony principles to give it a more malleable, appealing aesthetic. Maybe not literally squish the character model like in Mega Man Powered Up, but perhaps use some more squash and stretch techniques. I'm going to go out on a weird limb here, but suggest Mighty Number 9, of all things, as an example of where you can be more playful with things. Mighty stretches up launching from a jump, which kind of smooths that whole action out somewhat, and the landing stumble is a really nice addition that isn't detrimental to gameplay. Hey, maybe even draw some ideas from Hollow Knight, such as a very subtle turning animation when changing direction, for example. As long as everything feeds back into feel and keeping that tight quality Mega Man is known for, I think you're golden. You lot are gods for sitting through this. I really appreciate it. Feel free to suggest down below anything interesting you think I didn't cover, your favourite animation in the classic Mega Man series, things you think Mega Man could do with adding to his animation in future, and generally if you like the video, give it a thumbs up as this helps the YouTube algorithm share the video around. I don't get as much time to make videos anymore, it has to be something really tasty for me to get my teeth sunk into. I generally don't like repeating myself, sometimes I'll play a really nice looking game, but if in the end all I'm going to say is, that looks really nice, over and over, then I don't think that's going to make a terribly engaging video. Sometimes animation is just really nice, and there's nothing groundbreaking that I can find to discuss about it. Anyway, time for me to let you lovelies go and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks to my patrons for supporting this one, and everyone who's watched along. Just gonna round this video off actually by showing you my favourite portion of a special Mega Man cartoon called Mega Man Upon a Star, which was an edutainment special showing off the culture of Japan while Mega Man battles Dr. Wily. Mega Man literally jumps from the game world into our world, and for a short time we get to see him being played in Mega Man 5, and it's interesting the animators chose a side-on approach to represent him in-game in close-ups, and no, they've given him a bloody jog run! Okay, love you, bye! See, what I don't understand is why Mega Man 2 has suddenly changed from one of the best games ever to one of the worst games of the series, according to fans. You know?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's aged quite a bit, but how do you judge a game? Do you judge it how it was then, or how it is now?
40.
What do you think of Mega Man 2?
Mega Man.
Do you like it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Like, I mean, you know, just don't use Metal Blade if it's too OP, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just get better at using the best weapon, which is clearly air shooter, or leaf shield, which isn't really a shield, but I'll explain that another time. What Mega Man game is your favourite?
Mega Man 11.
Of course you'd say that, tourist. Go and give me a packet of crisps.
No.